Lila Carter sat at a small desk in the dimly lit corner of the Accord's Grand Library on Nova Prime. Her fingers brushed over the surface of an ancient tablet, its edges worn smooth by time. Dust motes floated lazily in the pale light streaming through high windows, giving the room an almost sacred stillness. Around her, shelves stretched endlessly upward, filled with books, scrolls, and data crystals containing the collective knowledge of countless civilizations. Yet none of them mentioned Earth. The Stellar Accord governed millions of worlds across the galaxy, a coalition built to ensure peace and prosperity among the stars. But something about their history felt incomplete to Lila. She had always been drawn to stories of humanity's past, piecing together fragments of legends that spoke of a planet once called home by all humans. It was said this world held secrets so dangerous that its very name had been erased from every record. The council claimed it was for the greater good. But Lila couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story. Her eyes flicked toward the tablet again. A single phrase caught her attention. Project Embers. She whispered the words aloud as if saying them might unlock some hidden meaning. What did it mean? Was it a code, a mission, or perhaps a warning? Lila leaned closer, her heart beating faster as she traced the faint etchings on the stone. There were symbols carved into the surface symbols, unlike anything she'd seen before. They weren't part of any known language used by the Accord, which made them all the more intriguing. For hours, Lila pored over the tablet, cross-referencing its markings with other texts scattered across the library. Most led nowhere, dead ends buried under centuries of misinformation. But then, tucked away in a forgotten archive, she found a fragment of a map. The map was crude, barely legible, but it showed coordinates pointing to a region of space marked as restricted by the Council. The area was labeled simply as Zone X, surrounded by warnings of hazardous radiation and unstable gravitational fields. No ships ventured there, not even scout vessels. To most people, it was just another empty stretch of void. But to Lila, it was a clue. She spent days gathering what little information she could find about Zone X. Rumors hinted at strange phenomena occurring within its boundary ships, disappearing without a trace, bursts of energy detected by distant sensors, and whispers of ruins left behind by an unknown civilization. None of it added up, but Lila sensed that these threads were connected somehow. Each discovery brought her closer to uncovering the truth, though she knew the path ahead wouldn't be easy. The Council didn't take kindly to those who questioned their authority, and delving too deeply into forbidden topics could have dire consequences. It wasn't until one evening, while organizing her notes, that Lila heard footsteps approaching. Startled, she quickly shoved the map and tablet into her satchel, pretending to focus on a random book instead. A figure appeared at the edge of her Vishuna man, dressed in plain clothes, his face partially obscured by shadows. He hesitated for a moment, then stepped closer. "You're Lila Carter," he said, his voice low and measured. It wasn't a question. Lila stiffened, clutching the strap of her bag tightly. "Who wants to know?" Daniel Hayes, he replied, extending a hand cautiously. "I've been looking for you." Something about his tone set her on edge. "Why?" she asked, narrowing her eyes. Daniel glanced around the room before lowering his voice. "Because I think you're onto something big, something they don't want anyone else finding out." "They," Lila echoed, instinctively knowing who he meant. "The Council," Daniel confirmed. "They've kept us blind for centuries, feeding us lies about where we came from. But you've started asking questions. Dangerous ones." Lila studied him carefully, trying to gauge whether he was friend or foe. His appearance was unremarkable. Short brown hair, a scruffy beard, and tired eyes that hinted at sleepless nights. He looked like someone who had seen too much and carried the weight of it alone. Despite her reservations, there was sincerity in his expression that made her hesitate. "How do you know what I'm working on?" she asked finally. "I've been watching," Daniel admitted. "Ever since you accessed the classified archives last week, not many people have the guts to dig where they shouldn't. You're either incredibly brave or incredibly foolish." "Both," Lila muttered, glancing down at her bag. "What do you want from me?" To help, Daniel said simply. I've got resources you don't. Ships, contacts, access to places even the council can't reach. If you're serious about finding answers, I can get you closer than you ever thought possible. Lila considered his offer, weighing the risks. Trusting a stranger, especially one who seemed to know so much already, was risky. But she also knew she couldn't do this alone. The pieces of the puzzle were coming together slowly, but she needed someone who understood the stakes and wasn't afraid to push boundaries. Fine, she said after a long pause. If you double-cross me, I'll make sure you regret. A faint smile tugged at the corners of Daniel's mouth. Fair enough. Over the next few days, Daniel introduced Lila to his operation. His ship, the Ember Runner, was docked at a private hangar on the outskirts of Nova Prime. It wasn't much to look at, an old freighter patched together with spare parts, but it was fast and reliable. Inside, the cabin was cluttered with tools, maps, and various gadgets salvaged from other vessels. Lila immediately noticed a framed photograph hanging above the control panel. It showed a younger Daniel standing beside an older man, both smiling proudly in front of a sleek spacecraft. My father, Daniel explained when he saw her staring. He disappeared out near Zone X years ago. Never came back. Lila nodded sympathetically. Do you think he found something? I know he did, Daniel said firmly. Before he vanished, he sent me a message containing coordinates. First, I thought it was nonsense, just numbers and letters jumbled together. But when I decoded it, I realized it pointed straight to Zone X. That's why you're helping me, Lila said, realization dawning. You think whatever's out there is connected to Earth. It's the only explanation that makes sense, Daniel replied. And if we can prove the Council lied about Earth, well, let's just say the galaxy won't be the same afterward. As they prepared for their journey, Lila couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and dread. She had spent years searching for answers, and now she was finally close to discovering the truth. But the road ahead would be fraught with danger, not just from the hazards of space, but from those who sought to keep the past buried forever. Still, as she gazed out at the stars stretching endlessly beyond the viewport, she felt a spark of determination ignite within her. Whatever lay ahead, she was ready to face it. With the Ember Runner fueled and ready, Lila and Daniel set a course. For Zone X, neither of them knew exactly what awaited them, but one thing was certain: the flame of curiosity had been lit. And nothing, not even the vast emptiness of space, could extinguish it. The journey to Zone X began quietly. The hum of the Ember Runner's engines filling the cabin as Lila and Daniel left Nova Prime behind. Stars streaked past the viewport like tiny pinpricks of light, their brilliance dulled only by the vast emptiness surrounding them. For the first few days, the ship sailed smoothly through well-charted space, far from the prying eyes of the Stellar Accord or its patrols. But as they ventured deeper into unexplored territory, tension began to creep. Into the air, Lila spent most of her time poring over maps and notes, trying to piece together what little information they had about Zone X. The coordinates Daniel's father had sent were clear enough, but beyond that, details were scarce. She studied the fragment of the map she'd found in the library, comparing it to star charts stored in the ship's database. There were discrepancies, gaps where entire sectors seemed to have been erased or altered. But she couldn't tell if this was deliberate tampering by the Council or simply errors caused by outdated data. Daniel, meanwhile, kept a close watch on the ship's scanners. He knew better than anyone how dangerous this part of space could be. Stories of ships disappearing without warning weren't just rumors. They were warnings passed down among pilots who dared to stray too far from safe routes. Every now and then, the sensors would pick up faint energy readings or strange bursts of static, making him grip the controls a little tighter. "We're getting closer," he muttered one evening, his voice low and tense. "Whatever's out there, it's not going to let us waltz right in." Despite their shared goal, the two travelers struggled to find common ground. Lila was driven by curiosity and a desire for truth, while Daniel seemed more focused on uncovering whatever secrets his father had died chasing. Their motivations overlapped, but their methods clashed. Lila wanted to move carefully, gathering evidence and planning every step, whereas Daniel preferred quick decisions and bold actions. More than once, their disagreements erupted into heated arguments. leaving both of them frustrated and exhausted. "You don't understand what's at stake here," Lila snapped during one such exchange, slamming her hand against the console. "This isn't just about your father, it's about everyone. If we screw this up, we'll never get another chance. And if we sit around analyzing every little detail, we'll never get anywhere." Daniel shot back, his face flushed with anger. "You think the council is just going to sit back and let us poke around? We need to act fast before they catch? Wind of what we're doing?" Their clashes often ended in silence, each retreating to opposite ends of the ship to cool off. Yet despite their differences, they couldn't deny the bond forming between them. Both carried burdens heavier than they cared to admit. Lila's relentless pursuit of answers stemmed from a deep-seated need to belong, while Daniel's quest for closure masked a lifetime of guilt over his father's disappearance. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, they began to rely on each other, trusting that their combined strengths might overcome the challenges ahead. As the days turned into weeks, the ship entered a region marked by swirling clouds of cosmic dust and erratic gravitational pulls. Navigation became increasingly difficult, requiring constant adjustments to avoid being pulled off course. The temperature inside the cabin dropped noticeably, forcing Lila and Daniel to bundle up in thick jackets. Even the lights flickered occasionally, as though the very fabric of space was resisting their presence. One night, as Lila sat staring out the viewport, she noticed something unusual, a faint glow emanating from the horizon. At first she thought it was a trick of the light, but as the ship drew nearer, the glow grew brighter, taking shape as a massive field of debris scattered across the void. Pieces of metal floated aimlessly, some no larger than a coin, others big enough to dwarf the ship. Many bore markings etched into their surfaces, similar to those on the ancient tablet she discovered in the library. "Daniel," she called softly, pointing toward the wreckage. "Look." He joined her at the viewport, his expression grim. "That's not natural," he said, after a moment. "Something destroyed those ships, and whoever did it didn't want any survivors. They decided to investigate," steering the Ember Runner cautiously through the debris field. As they approached, the ship's sensors picked up faint traces of radiation lingering in the area. Lila donned a protective suit and stepped outside, tethered to the hull by a thin cable. Among the wreckage, she examined fragments of twisted metal and shattered glass, her heart pounding with a mix of awe and dread. Some pieces still bore recognizable insignious logos of companies and organizations, long forgotten, but none matched anything associated with the Stellar Accord. Back inside the ship, Ella showed Daniel what she'd found. A small, intact panel. With a partially legible inscription, it read, "Project Embers Phase 3. Her hands trembled as she held it up. "This confirms it," she whispered. "Whatever happened here, it's connected to Earth." Daniel nodded, his jaw tightening. "And someone went to great lengths to make sure no one ever figured it out." Their discovery reignited their determination, but it also heightened their awareness of the risks involved. They knew they were being watched, perhaps not directly, but certainly monitored. Ships traveling near restricted zones rarely went unnoticed, and the Council likely already suspected something was amiss. To minimize detection, they began transmitting false flight logs and rerouting their communications through encrypted channels. It was a risky strategy, but necessary if they hoped to reach Zone X undetected. As they continued their journey, the environment around them grew increasingly hostile. Electrical storms flared unpredictably, sending waves of interference rippling through the ship's systems. On several occasions, they narrowly avoided collisions with rogue asteroids or patches of dense plasma. Each hazard tested their resolve, pushing them to their limits physically and emotionally. Yet through it all, they pressed on, driven by the promise of uncovering the truth. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of Zone X. The boundary was marked by a shimmering barrier of energy, pulsating faintly like a heartbeat. Beyond it lay darkness so profound it seemed to swallow the light itself. Lila stared at it, her breath catching in her throat. "Is that real?" she asked hesitantly. "As real as it gets," Daniel replied, his voice tinged with awe. "Whatevers." On the other side doesn't want visitors. They prepared to cross, running final checks on the ship's shields and life support systems. Lila double-checked her equipment, ensuring everything was secure. As they initiated the sequence to breach the barrier, a sense of foreboding settled over them. Latter spoke, their minds racing with questions and fears. What awaited them on the other side? Would they find answers or only more mysteries? With a surge of power, the Ember Runner pierced through the barrier, emerging into a world unlike anything they'd ever seen. The sky above was a swirling mass of colors, shifting and twisting like liquid paint. Below stretched a barren landscape, littered with ruined crumbling towers, shattered domes, and skeletal frameworks of structures that hinted at a once thriving civilization. The air crackled with energy, and an eerie silence enveloped the scene. Broken only by the faint hum of the ship's engines, Leela and Daniel exchanged a glance, their earlier tensions momentarily forgotten. Whatever this place was, it held secrets. Buried for centuries, secrets that could change everything. For the first time since beginning their journey, they allowed themselves a glimmer of hope. The flame of curiosity burned brighter than ever, illuminating the path ahead even as shadows loomed large. Together, they stepped into the unknown, ready to confront whatever truths lay hidden within the desolate expanse before them. Lila and Daniel stood at the edge of the ruins, their boots crunching softly against the cracked ground. The air was thick with dust, swirling lazily in the faint breeze that seemed to carry whispers from another time. All around them stretched remnants of a forgotten world, broken towers leaning precariously, shattered domes half buried in sand, and skeletal frameworks of buildings that had once reached for the sky. It was as if the planet itself were holding its breath, waiting for someone to uncover its secrets. This place. It feels wrong, Daniel muttered, his voice barely audible over the eerie silence. He adjusted the strap of his utility belt, glancing nervously at the horizon where jagged mountains loomed like silent sentinels, like it doesn't want us here. Lila didn't respond immediately. Her eyes scanned the landscape, taking in every detail. There was something familiar about the ruins, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it. The shapes of the structures, the way they were arranged, reminded her of images she'd seen in old texts. Fragments of cities long lost to history. But this wasn't just any city. It was Earth, or at least what remained of it. "We're close," she said finally, her tone resolute despite the chill running down her spine. "Whatever we're looking for, it's here." They began exploring cautiously, moving deeper into the ruins. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if the weight of centuries pressed down on them. The closer they got to the heart of the settlement, the more pronounced the signs of destruction became. Walls bore scorch marks from weapons unknown. Streets were littered with debris, and there were even human skeletons scattered among the rubble. Lila knelt beside one, brushing away layers of dust to reveal fragments of clothing and personal belongings. A rusted bracelet clung stubbornly to a wrist bone, surface engraved with initials, "EM. These people lived here," Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "They had families, dreams. And then everything was taken from them." Daniel crouched beside her, his expression grim. Whatever happened here, it wasn't natural. Once someone wiped this place off the map and made damn sure no one would ever find it again. As they continued their search, they stumbled upon murals painted on the walls of a partially intact building. The colors had faded, but the images were still clear enough to decipher. Scenes depicted humans living ordinary lives, children playing in parks, farmers tending fields, scientists working in labs. But as the murals progressed, the tone shifted. War erupted, skies filled with smoke, and people fled in terror. In the final panel, a massive exodus was shown, with countless ships departing from the planet's surface. Below the image, etched into the stone, were words written in an ancient script. "Earth will rise again." Lila traced the letters with her fingers, her mind racing. "This isn't just a record of what happened," she said slowly. "It's a message, a promise." They left, but they believed they'd return someday. Daniel nodded, though his brow furrowed in thought. If they left, where did they go? And why hasn't anyone found them? Before Lila could answer, the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. At first they thought it might be an aftershock. from some distant event, but then they heard it a low, mechanical hum growing louder by the second. Following the sound, they made their way toward a large structure that rose from the center of the ruins. Its design was unlike anything they'd seen before, a blend of organic curves and sharp angles that seemed almost alive. The entrance was sealed by a massive door covered in intricate patterns that pulsed faintly with light. "This must be it," Lila said, her voice tinged with awe. "The artifact the one mentioned in Project Embers." Daniel examined the door, searching for a way to open it. "There's got to be a mechanism somewhere," he muttered, running his hands along the edges. After several minutes of fruitless searching, he stepped back, frustration evident on his face. "Ack! We need a key or something." "Doubt it. We're not getting in." Lila frowned, studying the patterns on the door. Something about them felt familiar, like echoes of the symbols she'd seen on the tablet back in the library. She reached out hesitantly, placing her palm against the surface. To her astonishment, the door reacted instantly, the patterns glowing brighter as the hum grew louder. With a grinding noise, the massive slab slid aside, revealing a dark passageway beyond. "How did you do that?" Daniel asked, staring at her in disbelief. "I don't know," Lila admitted, her heart pounding. "Maybe it recognized me somehow." They entered cautiously, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. The interior was vast, a cavernous chamber, filled with strange machinery and glowing conduits. At the center of the room stood a pedestal, atop which rested the artifact they had traveled so far to find. It was a crystalline sphere, roughly the size of a human head, pulsating with a soft, rhythmic light. As they approached, the air around them seemed to vibrate, carrying with it a sense of immense power. Lila hesitated for a moment, then reached out to touch the sphere. The instant her fingers brushed its surface, a flood of images and sensations overwhelmed her. She saw flashes of Earth's past, its creation, its evolution, its civilizations rising and falling. She witnessed the Council's decision to erase Earth's name, driven by fear of rebellion and chaos. She felt the pain of those who had been forced to leave their home, carrying only memories and hope for the future. And finally, she understood the purpose of the artifact. It was a beacon, designed to preserve Earth's legacy and guide humanity back to its roots when the time was right. When the vision subsided, Lila staggered backward, clutching her head. Tears streamed down her face as she tried to process everything she had seen. "They didn't just bury Earth's name," she choked out. "They buried its soul, its spirit. Everything that made us who we are." Daniel steadied her, his expression grave. "So this thing, it's proof. Proof of where we came from and what they tried to hide?" "Yes," Lila replied, her voice steadying. "And it's also a weapon. If the Council finds out we have it, they'll stop at nothing to destroy it, Tandus." As they debated what to do next, alarms blared suddenly, echoing through the chamber. Red lights flashed along the walls, and the machinery around them sprang to life. Automated defenses, dormant for centuries, had detected intruders. The panels slid open, revealing rows of robotic sentries, armed with energy weapons. Their glowing eyes locked onto Lila and Daniel, tracking their every move. "Time to go?" Daniel shouted, grabbing Lila's arm and pulling her toward the exit. They sprinted through the passageway, the sentries hot on their heels. Energy seared the air around them, leaving scorch marks on the walls. Just as they reached the entrance, one of the blasts struck the ground near Daniel, sending him sprawling. Lila grabbed his hand and hauled him to his feet, urging him forward. Outside, the ship waited, engines already humming. They leaped aboard, sealing the hatch behind them as the robots emerged from the structure, firing relentlessly. Daniel took the controls, piloting the Ember Runner into the sky with reckless speed. Explosions rocked the ground below as the automated systems attempted to bring them down. But the ship's shields held firm as they broke free of the planet's atmosphere. Both collapsed into their seats, breathing heavily. The artifact sat securely in Lila's lap, its glow steady and unwavering. For a moment, neither spoke, too overwhelmed by what they had just endured. "We can't let them win," Lila said finally, her voice firm despite the exhaustion in her eyes. "Not after everything we've learned." Daniel nodded, determination, replacing the fear in his expression. Then we fight together. With the artifact safely in their possession and the truth burning brightly in their minds, they set a course for the stars, ready to ignite a flame that could never be extinguished. The journey away from the ruined planet was tense and silent. Lila sat in the co-pilot's seat, clutching the crystalline sphere tightly in her hands. Soft glow illuminated her face, casting shadows that mirrored the weight of what she now carried, not just the artifact, but the burden of its truth. Daniel focused on piloting the Ember Runner, his knuckles white as he gripped the controls. The ship's systems had taken a beating during their escape, and alarms blared intermittently, warning of failing shields and overheating engines. Neither spoke for a long time. The enormity of what they'd uncovered, and the danger they were, now hung heavy between them. They had seen the past, touched it even, and now they bore the responsibility of deciding its future. Lila's mind raced with questions. How could they share Earth's story without putting themselves at risk? Would anyone believe them? And most importantly, how far would the Council go to silence them? As they drifted further from the planet, the automated defenses faded into the distance, their glowing eyes no longer tracking the fleeing ship. But the sense of being hunted lingered. "We're not safe yet," Daniel said finally, breaking the silence. His voice was low, almost a growl. "If the Council doesn't already know where we are, they will soon." Lila nodded, though her gaze remained fixed on the artifact. She felt its warmth against her palms, a quiet reassurance that they weren't alone in this fight. "Come after us," she agreed. "But we can't let them win. Not after everything we've seen." Daniel glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "Do you really think people will care? Most of them don't even remember Earth existed. To them, it's just a myth." "It's not about whether they care," Lila replied, her tone firm. "It's about giving them a choice to know where they came from or stay blind. We owe them that much." Her words hung in the air unanswered. Daniel turned back to the controls, guiding the ship toward a nearby asteroid field where they could hide temporarily. The rocky expanse offered some cover, shielding them from prying sensors while they repaired the damage to the Ember Runner. As they landed on a jagged rock surface, the hum of the engines died down, leaving only the faint hiss of oxygen cycling through the cabin. For hours, they worked side by side, patching leaks, recalibrating the shields, and replacing burnt-out circuits. The labor gave them something else to focus on, a brief reprieve from the overwhelming reality of their situation. But as night fell, or whatever passed for night in the endless void of space, they found themselves sitting across from each other in the cramped galley, staring at mismatched cups of lukewarm coffee. "You ever wonder why your dad sent you those coordinates?" Lila asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Her question caught Daniel off guard, and he hesitated before answering. "All the time," he admitted, rubbing the back of his neck. "First I thought he wanted me to finish something he started. Maybe find out what happened to him. But now," he trailed off, glancing toward the artifact resting on the table between them. "Now I think he knew exactly what we'd find. He wanted someone to carry the torch when he couldn't." Lila nodded slowly, understanding flickering in her eyes. "Maybe that's why we're here too. Not because we chose this, but because we were meant to." The conversation shifted then, turning toward plans for what came next. They needed Elise people who could help spread Earth's story without drawing immediate suspicion from the Council. Lila suggested reaching out to independent journalists and historians scattered across the galaxy, individuals known for questioning authority and uncovering hidden truths. Daniel countered that such moves were too risky. The Council monitored communications closely, and any attempt to contact outsiders might expose their location. "We need to move carefully," he insisted. "One wrong step, and we're dead." "Then what do you suggest?" Lila shot back, frustration creeping into her voice. "Just sit here and wait for them to find us?" "No," Daniel replied sharply. "We can't rush into this either. If we make a mistake, it won't just be us paying the price. It'll be everyone who believes in what we're doing." Their argument ended abruptly when the ship's sensors picked up an incoming vessel. At first they assumed it was another patrol sent by the Council. But as the ship drew closer, its design became clear. It wasn't Accord military. It was sleek and polished, bearing the insignia of a high-ranking official. A private cruiser. "They're hailing us," Daniel said, his voice tight with tension. "What do we do?" Lila hesitated, then nodded toward the console. "Answer it. Let's see who it is." The screen flickered to life, revealing a woman seated in the cockpit of the approaching ship. She was older than Lila, with sharp features and piercing blue eyes that seemed to look straight through the camera. Her uniform marked her as a member of the Stellar Accord. But there was something different about her, something softer, less rigid than the typical council enforcer. "Leela Carter," the woman said, her tone calm yet commanding. "And Daniel?" "Hayes, you've caused quite a stir." Daniel leaned forward, his hand hovering near the controls. "Who are you and what do you want?" "My name is Rachel Monroe," the woman replied. "I'm a senior advisor to the council. Contrary to what you might think, I'm not here to arrest you." Lila exchanged a wary glance with Daniel before responding. "Then why are you here?" Rachel smiled faintly, as if amused by their skepticism. "Because I helped orchestrate your discovery of Project Embers." The statement hit like a punch to the gut. Lila's jaw dropped, and Daniel stiffened, his fingers tightening around the console. "What are you talking about?" Lila demanded. "I planted breadcrumbs for you to follow," Rachel explained. "The classified archives, the fragment of the map, was all part of a plan to recover the artifact. I knew you'd be curious enough to dig deeper, and I needed someone outside the council to retrieve it." "Why us?" Daniel asked, suspicion dripping from every word. "Why not send one of your own ships?" "Because the council doesn't trust me anymore," Rachel admitted, her smile fading. "They've grown complacent, content to keep humanity ignorant of its origins. But I believe the truth has value, and if it's dangerous." Lila studied her carefully, searching for any sign of deception. "So you used us," she said flatly. "You manipulated us into risking our lives for your agenda." "Hey, yes!" Rachel acknowledged without hesitation. "But I also gave you the tools to uncover something extraordinary, something the council has tried to bury for centuries. Now it's up to you to decide what to do with it." The weight of her words settled over them like a heavy blanket. Leela looked down at the artifact, its light pulsing steadily. She realized Rachel was right. They had been pawns in her game. They still held the power to change the rules. "What happens if we refuse to hand it over?" Daniel asked, his voice hard. Rachel's expression darkened. "Then I'll have no choice but to take it by force. And trust me, you don't want that." Tension crackled in the air as the three of them stared at each other, locked in a silent standoff. Finally, Lila spoke, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside. "You say you believe in the truth. Prove it. Tell us why the council erased Earth's name." Rachel sighed, leaning back in her seat, because knowledge is power. When humanity left Earth, they carried memories of division, conflict, and pain. The council feared those memories would tear society apart again. By erasing Earth, they hoped to create a blank slate, a new beginning, free from the mistakes of the past. "But they didn't just erase the name," Lila countered. "They erased hope, unity, everything that made us human." Rachel nodded grimly. "Yes. And now you have the chance to restore it, destroy it forever." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Lila and Daniel alone once more. For a long moment, neither moved, the implications of Rachel's words sinking in. They had a decision to make: trust her and risk losing control of the artifact, or defy her and face the consequences. "We can't give it to her," Leela said finally, her voice resolute. "If we do, she'll use it however she wants. We need to keep it safe." Daniel nodded, though his expression remained troubled. "Agreed. But how do we get out of this alive?" An idea began forming in Lila's mind, sparked by the artifacts. "Steady glow. We use it," she said simply. "It's not as a weapon, but as a beacon. If we broadcast Earth's story across the galaxy, we can bypass the council entirely. People deserve to know the truth even if it scares them." Daniel considered her plan, then nodded slowly. "It's risky, but it might work."
Right.
With renewed determination, they set to work rigging the artifact to emit a signal strong enough to reach every corner of inhabited space. Using spare parts from the ship's communication array, They created a makeshift transmitter capable of amplifying the artifact's energy. As they prepared to activate it, the sound of engines roared overhead. Dragel's cruiser had returned, flanked by 2 Accord patrol ships. "They're going to board us," Daniel warned, his voice urgent. "We need to hurry." Lila placed her hands on the artifact, feeling its warmth surge through her. "Ready?" He nodded, flipping the final switch. The artifact pulsed brightly, sending waves of light rippling outward. On the view screen, they watched as fragments of Earth's history began appearing, images of cities, families, and struggles long forgotten. Voices echoed through the transmission, speaking of hope, resilience, and unity. The artifact's transmissions spread like wildfire across the galaxy, carried by every communication network and relay station in its path. Within hours, fragments of Earth's story began appearing on screens and holographic displays from bustling spaceports to remote outposts. People stopped what they were doing mid-conversation, mid-work, to stare at the images flickering before them. Scenes of towering cities, lush forests, and crowded streets played out alongside glimpses of war, exodus, and hope. Voices spoke in languages long forgotten, their words translated automatically by advanced systems. For many, it was the first time they had ever heard of Earth. The name itself felt foreign, yet strangely familiar, as if buried deep within their collective memory. Some dismissed the broadcast as a hoax or propaganda, while others watched in stunned silence, tears streaming down their faces. Across millions of worlds, humanity paused to reflect on what it meant to have a shared origin, a home that had been lost but never truly forgotten. Lila and Daniel watched the reaction unfold from the safety of the Ember Runner, hidden among the asteroids. Their makeshift transmitter had done its job, sending Earth's story farther than they had imagined possible, yet neither felt triumphant. Instead, they sat in tense silence, waiting for the Council's response. They knew the transmission would not go unanswered. The Stellar Accord thrived on control, and exposing the truth about Earth threatened to unravel everything they had built. "They'll come after us," Daniel said finally, breaking the quiet. His voice was low, almost resigned. "This isn't just an attack on the Council, it's an attack on their entire system." Lila nodded, her fingers tracing the surface of the artifact. Its glow had dimmed significantly since the broadcast, leaving it looking more like an ordinary crystal than the powerful beacon it had been moments ago. "I know," she replied softly, "but we gave people a choice. Whether they believe us or not, the truth is out there now. They can't erase it again." Daniel glanced at her, his expression softening slightly. "You really think this will change anything?" "Already has," Leela said firmly. "Look at how people are responding. Even if only a fraction of them believe us, that's still millions of voices speaking out against the Council. That's power." Her words hung in the air, unchallenged. Both knew the road ahead would be fraught with danger. The Council wouldn't simply accept defeat. They would retaliate with everything they had. But for now, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet reflection. Watching as the galaxy grappled with the revelation of its past, hours later, the inevitable arrived, a fleet of Accord cruisers appeared on the horizon, their sleek forms slicing through the void like predators closing in on prey. Rachel Monroe's private ship led the charge, its engines glowing brightly as it approached the Ember Runner. This time, there was no hesitation, no attempt at negotiation. The message was clear: surrender or face destruction. "We need to move," Daniel said sharply, rushing to the controls. He powered up the engines, preparing to make a run for it. But before they could leave the asteroid field, a massive energy beam shot past them, narrowly missing the ship. The impact shook the vessel, throwing both Leela and Daniel off balance. "They're not playing around," Daniel muttered, gripping the controls tightly. "Hold on." He steered the ship into the dense cluster of rocks weaving between jagged formations as blasts of energy rained down around them. Alarms blared inside the cabin, warning of failing shields and structural damage. Sparks flew from overloaded circuits, and the temperature rose steadily as the ship struggled to keep up with the relentless assault. Lila clung to her seat, clutching the artifact protectively. She couldn't let it fall back into the Council's Hands not after everything they had sacrificed to bring it this far. We can't outrun them. She shouted over the chaos. They'll destroy us if we stay here. Then we fight. Daniel snapped back, his voice fierce. He slammed his hand against a button, activating the ship's last remaining defense mechanism. A burst of electromagnetic interference designed to disable nearby vessels. The pulse rippled outward, momentarily disrupting the Accord fleets. Targeting systems. Several ships veered off course, their weapons firing wildly into space, seizing the opportunity. Daniel pushed the engines to their limit, guiding the Ember Runner toward a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. The maneuver was risky, leaving little room for error, but it paid off. As they emerged on the other side, the pursuing ships were forced to slow down, unable to navigate the tight passages quickly. They won't follow us through there, Daniel said, breathing heavily. At least not right away. Leela nodded. Though her relief was short-lived, the ship was badly damaged, its systems barely holding together. It needed a safe place to regroup and repair. But finding one would be nearly impossible with the Council hunting them as they limped away. From the battle, Rachel's voice crackled over the comms. You've made your point, she said, her tone calm but edged with steel. Now stop before you get yourselves killed. Daniel hesitated, his hand hovering over the controls. For a moment, he considered responding, but Lila shook her head. Don't engage, she warned. She's trying to distract us. He nodded reluctantly, cutting off the transmission. Ahead of them, the vast emptiness of space stretched endlessly, offering no immediate refuge. They were running out of options in time. Hours turned into days as they drifted further into uncharted territory. Food supplies dwindled, and the ship's systems continued to degrade. Exhaustion weighed heavily on both of them, but they refused to give up. Every star they passed, every planet they scanned, brought a glimmer of hope that they might find sanctuary. Finally, they stumbled upon a small moon orbiting a gas giant. Its surface was barren and cold, but scans revealed a network of underground caves that could provide shelter. With no other alternatives, they landed in a secluded crater and set about securing the area. Using materials salvaged from the ship, they rigged traps and alarms to alert them of any approaching vessels. For the first time in days, they allowed themselves to rest. Sitting side by side in the dim light of the cave, they shared a meal of ration bars and stale water. The silence between them was comfortable, born of shared hardship and unwavering determination. You know? Daniel said after a while, his voice lighter than it had been in days. If someone had told me a month ago that I'd be risking my life to save the memory of a planet I didn't even know existed, I would have laughed in their face. Lila smiled faintly, leaning back against the rocky wall. Same here, but now. I can't imagine doing anything else. Daniel looked at her, his expression thoughtful. You ever wonder what happens next? After all this, I mean. The time, Lila admitted. Sometimes I think we'll inspire a revolution, people rising up to demand answers, to reclaim their heritage. Other times, she trailed off, her smile fading. Other times I worry we've just started something. We can't finish. Daniel reached out, placing a hand on hers. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. That's what matters. Their moment of connection was interrupted by a sudden alert from the ship's sensors. Someone or something was approaching. Grabbing their weapons, they crept toward the entrance of the cave, peering cautiously outside. To their surprise, they saw not an Accord cruiser, but a smaller vessel landing gently in the distance. Its design was unfamiliar, marked by symbols they didn't recognize. Who are they? Daniel whispered, his grip tightening on his blaster. I don't know, Leela replied, her heart pounding. But whoever they are, they found us. As the ship's hatch opened, figures stepped out into the dim light. They wore simple robes, their faces obscured by hoods. One of them raised a hand in greeting, speaking in a language neither Lila nor Daniel understood. But when the leader lowered their hood, revealing kind eyes and a warm smile, Lila felt a strange sense of recognition, as if these strangers carried a piece of Earth within them. They're survivors, realization dawning. From Earth, Daniel stared at her, then back at the group. Are you sure? I'm sure, Lila said, stepping forward. Voice trembled with emotion as she addressed the newcomers. We've been looking for you for so long. The leader nodded slowly, understanding flashing in their gaze. And now you've found us, they replied in halting, accented basic English. Welcome home. In that moment, Lila and Daniel realized their journey was far from over. They had uncovered Earth's past, but now they stood on the threshold of its future, if you were shaped by those who still remembered where they came from. Together, they vowed to protect that legacy, ensuring that the flame of Earth's spirit would burn brightly for generations to come. The strangers from the small vessel introduced themselves as members of a group they called the Keepers. Their leader, a woman named Kale, explained that their ancestors had fled Earth centuries ago during its final days, seeking refuge in the farthest corners of the galaxy. Over time, they had built hidden communities on remote moons and planets, preserving fragments of Earth's culture, language, and history. They lived quietly, avoiding contact with the stellar accord to protect their way of life and their secrets. Leela listened intently as Kale spoke, her heart swelling with both awe and sorrow. These people were living proof that Earth's legacy endured, even after everything it had endured. How did you survive? She asked finally, her voice trembling. How did you keep going when so much was lost? Kale smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting a deep well of resilience. We carried the flame, she said simply. It's not just in our memories, but in our actions. We taught our children about Earth, not just the pain of its fall, but the beauty of what it once was. Kept its stories alive because they reminded us of who we are. Daniel stood nearby, his arms crossed as he absorbed the weight of Kale's words. He glanced at Lila, seeing the same mix of wonder and determination in her expression that he felt stirring within himself. For so long, they had been chasing answers, driven by the hope of uncovering Earth's truth. Now, standing before these survivors, they realized their mission had only just begun. We need your help, Leela said, stepping forward. The Council knows about the artifact. I'll do anything to stop its message from spreading. If we don't act now, they'll bury Earth's name again, and this time there might be no one left to remember. Kale nodded slowly, as if she had expected this request. You've already done more than anyone could have hoped, she replied. But yes, we will stand with you. The Keepers have waited for centuries for a chance to reclaim our heritage. This is it. Over the next few days, Leela and Daniel worked alongside the Keepers to prepare for the fight ahead. The underground caves became a makeshift command center, filled with maps, communications equipment, and plans for how to counter the Council's inevitable response. Kale's people brought knowledge and resources that neither Lila nor Daniel could have imagined. Ancient texts detailing Earth's history, advanced technology salvaged from their exodus, and a network of allies scattered across the galaxy who still believed in humanity's shared origin. As they strategized, Lila couldn't help but marvel at the diversity among the Keepers. Some bore physical traits reminiscent of Earth's many cultures: dark skin, light eyes, curly hair, straight hair, but others showed signs of adaptation to new environments, their appearances altered by generations spent on alien worlds. Despite these differences, they all shared a common bond, an unshakable connection to Earth and its story. One evening, as the group gathered around a flickering holographic display, Kale turned to Lila and Daniel. Tell us why you're doing this, she said softly. What drives you to risk so much for a planet you've never seen? Lila hesitated, searching for the right words. Because I believe humanity deserves to know where it came from, she said finally. Knowing our past gives us roots. It reminds us that we're not alone, even when it feels like we are. And maybe understanding Earth's mistakes can help us build something better, Daniel added. And because someone has to. If we don't fight for the truth, who will? Kale studied them for a moment, then smiled. You remind me of my grandparents, she said. They were dreamers too, always talking about a future where humanity could unite instead of divide. It's good to see their spirit lives on in people like you. The Council's retaliation came sooner than expected. A massive fleet descended upon the moon, surrounding the crater where the Ember Runner lay hidden. Ships bristling with weapons hovered menacingly overhead, their spotlights cutting through the darkness. Rachel Monroe's cruiser led the charge, its sleek form gleaming under the pale glow of the gas giant above. "They're here," Daniel muttered, peering through a crack in the cave entrance. His hand tightened around a blaster rifle, though he knew conventional weapons would be useless against such overwhelming force. "Stay calm," Al instructed, her voice steady despite the tension in the air. "We've prepared for this." True. To her word, the Keepers sprang into action. Hidden turrets emerged from the rocky terrain, firing concentrated bursts of energy at the Accord ships. Drones programmed with evasive maneuvers darted between the vessels, creating chaos and confusion. Meanwhile, a team of engineers worked frantically to activate a device designed to disrupt the fleet's communication systems. Relic from Earth's golden age of innovation? Rachel's voice crackled over the comms, demanding surrender. "This doesn't have to end in bloodshed," she shouted. "Hand over the artifact, and we'll let you walk away." Lila clenched her fists, anger flaring in her chest. "She's lying," she spat. "If we give in, she'll destroy everything." "We've worked for. She's right," Kale agreed. "Can't trust her." Not anymore. The battle raged on, each side trading blows in a desperate struggle for control. Explosions rocked the surface of the moon, sending plumes of dust billowing into the sky. Inside the cave, the ground trembled violently, threatening to collapse. The fragile structure around them. Yet even amid the chaos, Lila and Daniel remained focused, determined to see their mission through to the end. Finally, the engineers succeeded in activating the disruption device. A pulse of energy surged outward, engulfing the Accord fleet in a wave of interference. Ship after ship faltered, their systems crippled by the sudden assault. Rachel's cruiser wavered uncertainly, its engines sputtering as it tried to maintain altitude. "Now's our chance," Kale exclaimed. "We hit them hard while they're vulnerable." With renewed vigor, the Keepers launched a coordinated attack, targeting key points on the enemy vessels. Blasts of energy tore through hulls, forcing several ships to retreat. Others crashed onto the moon's surface, their crews abandoning ship and escape pods. Within minutes, the tide of the battle had shifted decisively in their favor. As the last of the Accord fleet limped away, Rachel's voice echoed one final time over the comms. "You may have won this round," she warned, "but the Council will never stop hunting you. You've made enemies of the most powerful force in the galaxy." Leela stepped forward, her voice ringing out loud and clear. "Then let them come. We're not afraid of them or their lies. Earth's story belongs to everyone, and we'll defend it with everything we have." Her words hung in the air, bolstering the spirits of those around her. Even Kale seemed moved, nodding approvingly as she turned to address the group. "Today, we've taken the first step toward reclaiming our future," she declared. "But the fight isn't over. We must spread Earth's message to every corner of the galaxy, to every person who has forgotten where they came from." In the weeks that followed, the Keepers set about fulfilling that promise. Using the artifact as a focal point, they recorded detailed accounts of Earth's history and broadcast them across the stars. These transmissions reached places the Council couldn't silence: remote colonies, independent stations, and even rogue factions disillusioned with the Accord's rule. Everywhere the message spread, it sparked debate, outrage, and ultimately, change. People began organizing protests, demanding transparency from the Council, and calling for reforms. Historians and scholars joined forces to piece together the full scope of humanity's origins, using the information provided by the Keepers as a foundation. Slowly but surely, the narrative of Earth's erasure unraveled, replaced by a new understanding of unity and resilience. For Lila and Daniel, the journey was far from easy. They faced constant threats from Accord enforcers, narrow escapes from ambushes, and moments of doubt when the odds seemed insurmountable. But they also found strength in their growing alliance with the Keepers, drawing inspiration from their unwavering commitment to preserving Earth's legacy. Eventually, they chose to disappear into the stars, knowing their work was far from finished. Together, they vowed to continue seeking knowledge suppressed by those in power, ensuring humanity never forgot its true identity. As they charted a course toward the unknown, the crystalline sphere glowed softly in Lila's hands, its light steady and unwavering, a reminder that even buried flames can burn brightly again. And somewhere, deep within the hearts of billions, the spirit of Earth stirred, ready to rise once more.